So read, stuck on the block, read, sitting in the box, read. What's going on, people? This is Akala, and this week on Great Reads we have our first double bill, because I didn't feel there was a need to do these two separately. This gentleman, the author of these books, happens to be one of my many teachers, and I mean literally I went to his classes and was schooled by him on top of reading his books. He is easily the most prominent scholar of African history in Britain, certainly from the black community. He's the most prominent scholar of African history in Britain for me, full stop. There's others that get more airtime, but I don't think anyone has offered a comprehensive single volume history of African civilizations and of the black world than this volume here, certainly in the last 30 years. When We Ruled by Robin Walker. There's many multi-volumes like UNESCO General Histories of Africa, but that's 15 volumes long. I'd recommend reading it if you're deep into the history. But this book right here really it's actually embarrassing when you read a book like this, whether you're a black person or not. You will feel you've been so lied to by the world. It will be hard for you to trust anything you're taught in mainstream historiography again. Because he, with quote after quote and reference after reference, and directly quoting European explorers and sources and people that went to Africa themselves and what they wrote, what they drew, with pictorial evidence, with archaeological evidence, with photos of the archaeological remains of certain civilizations, with photographs of artifacts, with every conceivable type of historical evidence, he completely shatters this ridiculous myth that no one really should believe in the 21st century, that Africans were running around chasing lions and tigers in loincloths waiting for Europeans to come and save them. He goes through all, right from so-called prehistory, I don't know if there's such a thing, all the way from ancient Egypt to Nubia to Ethiopia. He literally covers the entire African continent, what they call the Golden Age of West Africa, which was just prior to the onset of transatlantic slavery. All the civilizations were there, from the Malian, Mandingo Empire, Gao, Songhai, Timbuktu, those universities, Benin, the Yoruba kingdoms from from at least 1000 BC in the Nok Kingdom all the way through to Benin. I mean, he surveys the whole history, and it just becomes really, really embarrassing. In the 21st century, the perception of Africa and of black people's contribution to the human story is still so... Look, just one picture here. This is a picture of, obviously, some relatively well-off women in Abyssinia, which today would be Ethiopia, in 1845, how they dressed quite fly. And to be fair, they could still dress like that today. There's not many societies that can say their mode of dress would still be banging in today's world. Here is a stele from ancient Ethiopia, from the Aksumite kingdom, 100 AD, that weighs 300 tons, which is about the same as 450 family-sized cars. How Ethiopians got that to stand up 2,000 years ago, nobody knows. There's a university from the Malian Empire, which also served as a mosque. I can go on and on and on with example after example after example. But what's most fascinating is what European explorers and colonists actually said versus what the public was told for public consumption. And he quotes so many European explorers and colonists and missionaries and others about what they actually said about what they saw in Africa, including a guy who witnesses a successful cesarean section in Uganda, before there was any successful cesarean sections in the Western world. And by successful, I mean the mother and the child stayed alive after the cesarean. Many, many things like that. Huge part of the human story. There are many people so narrow-minded and ignorant that they think the history of black people is not relevant to them. There are many black people that have internalized the idea that Africa has been eternally in the problems that it's in today, or some of the problems, even though they are too distorted. And this is probably the best antidote you could ever have to that ignorant, ridiculous, ahistorical position. When We Ruled by Robin Walker is this week's great read, and easily the best single volume history of the African world and its diaspora. But I have included in the double bill an add-on, which particularly for younger readers is a fantastic resource. It's basically a short version of When We Ruled that focuses on the pictures. So, this is a reconstruction of a palace from the Swahili Confederation, for example, that's based on the archaeology, shows that they had swimming pools a few hundred years ago, among other things. And you start to see really, really brilliant and decent resource, pictorial resource that you can use A lot of people have asked me where I got most of the images from my Oxford Union presentation. A lot of them were from this book. And one of the reasons I haven't made that presentation in public is because I think, you know, Robin has spent decades researching these things. You know, people should support the book. It's not an expensive book. Those that can afford it. Obviously, if someone from a region of the world or from a place that can't afford the postage or can't get a copy of the book for whatever wants the slides, I'm sure even Robin would be happy to send them with permission of the photographers. But anyone who can afford it really should support. For tremendous double bill, tremendous resources from a monumental and brilliant scholar who I'm lucky enough to call one of my teachers. The second add-on in our first double bill in this week's Great Read is Before the Slave Trade by Robin Walker.
So read, stuck on the block, read, sitting in the box, read.